To accelerate or not to accelerate? That is the question.
That is quite a question, and I've got some answers for you. Hi, I'm Miss Andrea.
And I'm Miss Mare. This is Tea Time.
Acceleration is one of my favorite things. If you can accelerate, accelerate. But what does acceleration even look like?
So for a baseline understanding, traditional schooling systems that we have, students start kindergarten, usually 5 or 6, first grade, second grade, through 12th grade, graduate 12th grade, 17, 18. That's the standard order of events. So when we're talking about accelerating, we're talking about a student graduating high school prior to that timeline.
I graduated one child at 16. She was a summer birthday. So I graduated a 16-year-old and I sent a 17-year-old to college.
Got it.
I almost graduated a 16-year-old boy.
But he wanted
But at 16, he was like, I'm not ready for this. And we made a plan to break his senior year in half and to give him more enrichment, more time on photography.
Right.
Graduated him at 17. Jordan accelerated a lot because Jordan's 2 whole years behind him. And they kind of finished pretty much neck and neck. Younger kids will do that if they're competitive with their older siblings.
Yeah.
So acceleration often happens by accident and you just have to be paying attention. For example, our first year of homeschooling was 2nd grade.
Okay.
I put Jordan on time for learning. If you hear her talk about time for learning, it is the worst thing known to man.
Okay, look at me. Do not put a high schooler in time for learning.
But for a 2nd grader, it was amazing. And then in December, I looked up and she was done with 2nd grade. And then she did the 3rd grade curriculum. And here we were in May, and she was ready for 4th grade.
Let's talk for a minute about how subjects are taught at each level, elementary, middle, high school, because I think that also helps to understand why accelerating really is so very simple.
For example, history is taught in a 4-year cycle 3 times.
Right.
So the first time you're imparting information. The second time you're having a conversation.
Yep.
And the 3rd time you're analyzing, writing, theorizing, or researching. You're going deeper into the information. And so technically, if the first time the child gets it, they're already at that engagement point, and just go right to the higher level the next time.
So especially children who are starting homeschooling at a younger age, if they're starting homeschooling with the elementary material, they're already going to be talking about it. That's kind of one of the crux of homeschool things is you kind of go through the material with your child, and in lieu of sitting down and taking pop quizzes and written tests, you're having conversations with your child to see what they've learned, what they know, what do they need to learn next. And so it's entirely possible and reasonable, especially with a student that's a self-directed learner, especially with a student that's getting one-on-one instruction, especially with a student that has the freedom to go as deep as they want to go into a subject, to skip middle school entirely.
Well, yes and no. I wouldn't skip middle school entirely. So our first acceleration was 2nd, 3rd grade. 4th grade, she was like, I'm ahead. I'm only reading books this year.
Oh, don't do that.
It was fine. She read a lot of books. Her verbal is off the chart.
Fair. But you shouldn't take a year off math.
I didn't let her take a year off math. She did math and read books.
Okay, that's different.
So we actually lost that year technically in science and social studies. Technically. But the acceleration showed up again in a homeschool program for middle school. Because remember, I've said earlier that I had to give them to someone else in middle school because they decided they knew more than me.
Right.
So the cool thing about homeschool programs are they're often mixed grade classes. So because Jordan in particular was in mixed age classes in middle school, I'm having a conversation with the homeschool director at the end of the year. And I'm like, Jordan's in 8th grade next year. Isn't that exciting? And she looked at me and blinked and said, oh, no, she should be in high school. And I'm like, but she's 11. And she was like, she should be in high school. She was turning 12 that summer. Fortunately, summer birthday. And I'm like, come again? And she's like, so what happened was mixed grade classes, and she was performing at the top of the class. Jordan's a high school candidate. And so I don't believe that we should skip middle school entirely, but I think 8th grade should always be skipped if the child's... 8th grade is the year where we fix things that aren't going right or we accelerate.
Right.
8th grade is a transitional year.
Yeah. Here's where I think that middle school serves a purpose. Middle school is your social, emotional learning playground, and that's where you develop the habits that are going to make you successful later. If those habits are already in place, If there's already a reasonable level of emotional intelligence, you can skip it completely. It's not that important.
Let's take American history, for example. The first time we taught American history was the first year of our homeschool program. And, you know, we kind of did it very conversationally. So we jumped right there because we didn't have babies.
Right.
You know, we had, the smallest child we had was maybe 8 or 9
something like
at
that
the time. And now we take kids at 10, 11. So I just taught a lot of that same group American history again at the high school level. They knew it.
They knew it.
They'd be like, and what about? And I'm like, give me a minute. So all I really had to do this year was to provide context. Okay, so we know this happened, but do you know about this little thing that precipitated it?
Right.
Or do you know how these two things are connected? It was just so easy and so hard to teach American history to children who had seen it before. And so that's what happens in homeschooling, and that's kind of how acceleration happens accidentally.
Organically.
Because the children have already absorbed the information, and now you just need to make sure they can do the research around it and fine-tune the details, start theorizing and giving their own feedback and opinions about it.
And one of the other things, and this feeds into skipping some of those steps, because you do the introduction, then you do the talking about, then you do the analyzing. Some of that happens very naturally in homeschooling, because as opposed to a classroom environment where you have 15, 20, 30 students and the teacher, you don't have the opportunity for discussion the way that you do when you have 1 or 2 kids and a parent, or a small micro school kind of environment. All of those are ripe for discussion in a way that a larger student body would not be.
Right.
You have the opportunity, because you're doing this individualized education, to really hone in on meeting a child where they are. When you identify that a child's struggling with a piece of information, it doesn't take long to remedy that, as opposed to if it's a large classroom full of students, finding that a child's having difficulty with a particular thing, you might be 3 or 4 weeks in before you see that because you did a test. And so now, oh wait, we see this gap in knowledge that we didn't realize was there. Now we have to go back and remedy that. When you're doing this smaller, almost one-on-one teaching, you identify
even
those
up to
gaps.
10 or 12 students.
Even up to 10 or 12 students, you identify those gaps, you identify where somebody's struggling to understand something very quickly. So that's going to also fuel in this natural acceleration of the learning model.
With that said, under 5th grade, I think some acceleration happens here and there. The cool thing about homeschooling is you can accelerate in one subject and not accelerate in the other. And that's also where you're going to start to see your children's proclivities and their giftedness anyway. Then when we hit 7th grade, you need to look at what level your kids are writing on. And you need to look at what level your kid's doing in math, because all the rest falls in.
Right.
It does.
So how do you tell what level your child's writing on?
First, I grade for content. A child is writing well if you can read 500 words in 5 minutes. Like, it's understandable. But besides that, does this make me go, that was interesting? Correctness of knowledge.
Right.
Grammar. Are they punctuating correctly? When they get to high school, are they citing sources? Things of that nature. I run it through a readability score, and there's so many readabilities now where they'll do all the different readabilities and then give you your average readability. And that's how I know what grade level a child is writing at. And so I've had several parents say to me, I don't believe this high score for my child's writing. You love my child.
You're biased.
So I started using readability formulas. Second of all, there are also tools, paperrater.com. You tell it what grade the child's in. You put the paper in, it'll be like B. And then it'll say this is not complete, check for knowledge, correctness, and things like that.
Those are tools that we use. A lot of our students may be college bound. If they're not necessarily college bound, we try and tailor their portfolio so they could be if they change their mind 2 or 3 years down the road. Colleges like to see those unbiased, algorithmic calculations on writing.
The Ivy League colleges actually want a paper, on paper, hand-corrected in red ink. They want to see that you can be unbiased. They want to see that you corrected your child's writing. And you didn't just go, it's perfect because you're my little sweet angel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But a lot of colleges are going to ask, what website did you run this through to get this number? You know, what algorithm did you use to calculate this feedback? So the whole discussion is about whether you should accelerate or not.
Right.
And so up to this point, the answer's kind of been unequivocally yes.
Maybe.
When should you not accelerate?
Okay, I'm of the opinion that every child holds some level of genius and you just need to figure out where. So I would only accelerate when you're seeing that tremendous growth across the board. Like, you can't send a child who's struggling to read to college to do math because there's going to be reading involved. You can't send a child who's struggling in math to college because that's gonna that's gonna hurt hard. But you can do amazing things to feed their giftedness in a non-accelerated situation. Like, I have several kids right now where I'm like, 8th grade? All signs point you to 11th.
Right.
So 2 more years with me and dual enrolled. And that's my goal for all of my children who are moving that quickly, is to dual enroll. Or do what my kid did and just tap out, and go on to college. But there are children who are just very gifted in math only.
Right.
Very gifted in verbal only. And my child was actually pushing it.
Right.
But she was also gifted in theater.
Right.
And I didn't have the resources for her to do theater in the community that we were in. And in those cases, that's just the cool thing about homeschooling. You can zero in on those subjects where the children need help and get them the remediation they need. At the same time, lift that area of giftedness, like heave it all the way up. And so that doesn't call for like an academic acceleration by sending them to college or dual enrolling them. Although there's some opportunities to take CLEP exams in those areas where they're gifted. I would just exploit the mess out of their gifted area because that's going to inform their eventual college journey.
Right. So what about a student? Academically, they're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
They've got good test scores. They've taken the SAT. Their SAT score is solid, but they don't have the work ethic to be successful in college.
They're not ready.
So what do you do with them?
Enrichment. Well, you let them have some fun. Sometimes as parents, we spend way too much time on their academics, and we find ways to have fun that are going to help their work ethic. Scouts, taekwondo. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We find work ethic type activities that are going to slyly help them build those muscles. You find enrichment that's going to build character. And then after a year of that, they'll be ready to go, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we have students, again, they're excelling academically. They test really well on the SAT. They get into college, but they're really, really young.
There are other things a child could be doing. Now, I don't know if y'all know this, but African Americans who homeschool don't play. We often have kids finishing high school and college between the age of 14 and 16. However, a child who is not emotionally mature enough to handle that, or who doesn't have that parent right there cradling them while they're doing it, because there's an amount of parental support that can go into that.
Sure.
That will give that child the security they need to do that. But when you get onto the campuses are like, I guess you're going to be here too. Or some very special campuses like Morehouse. I've seen Morehouse do some really amazing things with some really young boys.
So that may be more about picking the right place.
It's about picking the right environment. I picked the right environment for my daughter now. It was a wild environment, but it was a better environment for her than...
She went to orientation, and what did they say?
You're emancipated. You're an adult now. And she was like, where do I sign that I'm not an adult? That mommy, I need my mommy. I mean, just because a child is academically there doesn't mean you have to send them to college. I know a couple of kids dual enrolled online, part-time, and then the other part-time went to the homeschool program with their same aged peers. So they got the academics they needed online and the companionship they needed in person. We live in the digital age, my dude. Like, there's so many ways to do this. Or I know of one family, they just got the boys mentors. One boy was an artist. They went to the community and said, artist, my son's spending time with you every week. My son's spending time with the scientist this week. So there's mentorships. There are opportunities that kids in public school can't access.
Right.
And if we have time to kill because we've accelerated and now we're like too young for the next step, now now there's just so many meaty little amazing experiences that we can throw in there that are going to enrich the children and stretch them in ways that we can't even imagine yet.
Right. There's one young man in our orbit who started a business. He's 16.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Running a pretty successful business at 16. Because finished the high school stuff and
it's like, I don't know what to do next.
Doing the thing. So,
yeah.
There are opportunities out there. Acceleration doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to throw a young child into college. It just means that we're going to do what's necessary to be considered fully educated through what the average person would consider a 12th grade level.
So accelerate if you can. Start off slow. Let the child's forward momentum guide that. And then there are things like, you know, you want to give the SAT. You want to make sure that this is a figment of your imagination and that this is really happening. Then you want to look into college level examination program, is the word I keep saying is CLEP. This is a whole program by the U.S. military that lets people in the military get their education at the same time. And part of my daughter's and my son's acceleration were some CLEP exams. If your child's reading classical books, analyzing, interpreting literature, they're going to pass it. Right? There are things you can do without putting them in college to show that they're operating on a college level, which is kind of important if the goal is Ivy League. If the goal is Ivy League, don't accelerate them. Let them shine on their merit.
Take the years that you have gained back by accelerating to lean into a passion, to really develop the individual character and what they want to do.
So I think we have introduced more questions and answers here.
Possibly,
so
but let us
ask them.
Let us know what those questions are. Put those in the comments. So thank you for watching. We appreciate having you as always. And until next time.